Hello and welcome to Against the Storm. Many of you have probably been following this game for 2 years, up to 2 years or more now, and many of you have even been following my series, my gameplays through this game through the early access process over the last 2+ years. However, there are certainly some new folks who are here for the first time and who are experiencing the game for the first time. Against the Storm appears to be a city builder. However, it is not just a city builder. It is actually a roguelike city builder, which may not be unique anymore in its genre, but at the time of its initial release into early access 2 years ago or so, was unique in that combination of genres. And so, many of you are probably out there on the internet looking for help. How do I get through this or that or this other thing that is constantly causing me to lose my towns? I was there with you in the first time I played after the tutorials. The tutorials are fairly easy compared to where the game puts you, although the gap has gotten smaller over the early access period. And so if you came here looking for help, you've come to the right place. I have 250 or so Let's Play episodes out there here on my YouTube channel in a few different playlists. If you are a very new user and would like a very tight hands-on explanation of how things are, you can of course check out my tutorials series, which I am actively working on updating. There will be several updated tutorials coming out simultaneous or right around the release of this video. But also, you can check out especially the first 6 to 8 or 9 episodes of my Steam release Let's Play series, because I did go through a very slow and methodical analysis of why I made the choices for that first town after the tutorial, why I read through all the decisions that could be made, and I kind of gave a lot of explanation as to what I was doing. I don't intend to do that with this series to the same extent. I'm giving, of course, a longer introduction here for those of you who watched before, but I do intend to give some explanation for those of you who are new. So while I'm directing you to watch the first handful of episodes of that first series, and by all means more of it, the first 1 to 2 towns is what I'm referring to there in that series. I don't want you to feel like this series isn't for you, because it still is. There will still be a lot of early game explanation, just not quite the level of detail that I covered in that series. Part of that is because I do have the tutorials that I created a year ago at the beginning of that series, or alongside the beginning of that series, that I didn't have yet when I created when I started that series, or at least not to that extent. So I know what's in the tutorials. I know what will be in the tutorials that have not yet been recorded or updated, at least to some extent, so I don't need to go through quite the detail of every decision or why the decisions are made or how the different aspects of the game work, because those are covered in those tutorials. So, kind of a short story long. If you are new to the game, please check out my tutorials if you have questions on how things work. And also watch the first part of the Steam release series from about a year ago. Beyond that, the game is in 1.0, which means that we will not be having the rate of change that the game had in the past. The developers kept themselves on a very strict 2-week update cycle, which means that while the changes were often small and iterative, sometimes they were pretty impactful, or a new system was introduced, or a new species was introduced, playable species, and more and more. So a lot of times we had a very huge change on a patch cycle, and sometimes we had a very small change, especially the last several. And now that we're in 1.0, those of you who have been following the game for a while, I don't believe there's anything new in this version that wasn't in the final bug fix patches for the last version, except for the Queen's Hand challenge. We obviously won't get to that today, for those of you who know what it is, because, well, you have to complete a huge part of the progression in the rest of the game in order to get to that point. And so we'll get started with the game just with a few more introductory bits, and then we'll kind of get started into the game and into the town and into the first parts that you will experience as part of playing Against the Storm. So first, I'd like to just cover a few options, mostly I think in the gameplay tab. A lot of these things will control defaults and how things work as you're playing the game. I do talk about these a little bit in the introductory tutorial, as well as in relevant tutorials on things that relate to these settings in the tutorials themselves later in that series. But suffice it to say, there are a lot of options that can change your game experience greatly. So consider each of these settings, and if they're in a realm of discussion that I have covered in a tutorial, I should also be identifying those settings in that tutorial and telling you the reasons why I choose the setting that I do, and or the reason why I don't choose the setting that I do. Otherwise, most of the settings are kind of your standard type of thing. So I think we'll just take a look at one more thing, and that is this Change Profile button. When you start the game, you start out by creating, I believe, when you start the game from scratch, never having played before, you start the game by creating a profile. And I did that 2+ years ago when I started playing on the Epic exclusive early access version. We did that with this one, and then we moved on to the Steam release with a brand new save then. I also have a test save here, but we have 2 more slots to use at least, and so we're going to create a new save today, number 4, but it's also going to be called Wally 1.0, and that is today. So we are now in a brand new going to open up a brand new save and start the game from the beginning, although we are going to skip the 2 tutorial levels. I played those on screen during my demo feature series, as well as during the Epic series. So if you want to see those, even though they're a little bit different, you can see them there, but I don't think including them here as part of this series is worth most of your time, because the demos are fairly self-explanatory. That is, the first 2 tutorials, the first 2 tutorial levels are fairly self-explanatory, and so I don't think featuring them here is worth most folks' time, either because you made it through them fairly unscathed as a new player, or you've seen them before as either a veteran viewer or player. So let's go ahead and pick this save. And it does do a little bit of a reload. That's because it's changing a few things behind the scenes and accessing a new save folder on your hard drive. But otherwise, the settings in the options menu are the same. They are persistent across the different profiles, although you do have the option here in the options menu, the settings menu rather, to skip the tutorial. You can do that here, which is a little bit of a time savings rather than doing it as part of the gameplay start. So if you have played the game before and you're starting a new save like I am, come into the settings and find that skip tutorial button right there. So I'm going to say yes, and then we will close the settings, and we're going to go ahead and click play. So because I skipped the tutorials, I get the benefits, the rewards that I would have gotten by completing the tutorial, including enough experience to get myself to level 2, and to unlock a handful of items here, including the first tier of the Citadel upgrades, which we will talk about in a little bit here. A few essential buildings that are available now as part of completing the tutorials, even though we didn't actually complete them. You'll see those yourself as you're playing through the game, either by having completed the tutorial or by having skipped the tutorial. And because I skipped the tutorials, by the way, in the settings menu versus canceling out of them by going into them individually and canceling out of them, these are actually not checked over here in the tutorials list. And that's because I didn't even look at them. So if you played through the tutorials, these will be checked. If you skipped them or you went in and canceled them individually, these should still be checked, I believe, based on my test experience. But there are 2 additional tutorials, one on hostility and trade, and one on Rainpunk and Blightrot. The hostility and trade is available at the beginning because those 2 aspects of the game affect you from the beginning of the game. However, the Rainpunk and Blightrot is not unlocked until you buy Obsidian Archive level 6 in the Smoldering City, which we'll get to in just a moment. What that means, but and then also you don't need this until you start playing as at least veteran level, and we'll get into what those levels are. Also down here, there are some read more tips that'll come up here and elsewhere in the game as we play through. I'm going to skip them for the purposes of this playthrough, but if you're a new player, you should be reading those as well, because they give you some information on how the whole game works. So here's our world map. On the world map, we can see a handful of things. One of those things is this part here that's got a bunch of different colors in it. This is the playable part of the world map. And then out here we have the fog of war covering the rest of the world map. We have some tiles here. These are all individual tiles, by the way, different hexagonal tiles. And each, so kind of reminds you a little bit of a game board, a physical game board, like a board game, like the old days. If you come into the options on the General tab this time, there's an option here to check the world map grid. And what that does is it puts the grid lines in on those hexes so you can see where they are and how count them more easily. That makes it look a bit more like a physical game board. So if you like that look, that's the setting there. I prefer the more smooth, more real, I guess for lack of a better word, map look. And so I leave them turned off in my own gameplay and for here on YouTube, of course. So there are these additional tile zones. This one's right here, poked at the very edge of the map. These are world modifiers, world map modifier tiles. And they give you either a benefit if the box in that pop-out window is green, or a detriment if it's red to your settlement that you're about to start. There are also additional types of world map tiles besides modifiers that are scattered around underneath these question mark tiles. So one of the sort of strategies of the game is not just to play randomly, but is to maybe look for these tiles and see if these points of interest might have something you might be interested in trying. So you kind of have to play in that direction, and we'll get to that in just a moment. We also see these glowy circles here. These are seals. There are different levels of seals, 8 different levels of seals, in fact, and each level is unlocked by completing the previous one, and these are these are, I guess, not related to, but they're basically related to the difficulty levels that you play the game as. So in order to complete this seal, which we'll get into seals as we get to this, into playing this, because we can't play this right now. This seal is a bronze seal, and its minimum difficulty, as you can see here, is Settler, and it requires 4 seal fragments to unlock. And we'll get into what that means and what the rest of this means when we get out to that point, just kind of showing you what that means. And Settler, by the way, is the easiest difficulty level. There are also these lines on the map, the bold lines here. Even in the grid view, they were bolder than the grid. These are the thresholds between the difficulties. So in the first difficulty level, Settler, you can only go out to this line, no further. In order to go further, you have to step up to the second difficulty level, which is Pioneer, and then so on and so forth out to the farthest, which is one of the prestige levels, possibly the highest prestige level, way out there. So even though you're limited in terms of how far you can expand at the easiest difficulty, and by the way, if you are a new player, I do recommend you play multiple towns at Settler before you try Pioneer. If you try Pioneer too early, you will know why I recommend that. If you try it and you succeed, then you'll know you were able to move on to Pioneer. That's kind of how the game works. But if you wanted to push out beyond this, it would not let you unless you upgraded to Pioneer, and then so on and so forth across the map. But there's plenty of space in here to play and complete easily one whole cycle, which is indicated by this bar on the bottom, which is 32 years, and we'll get into kind of what that means a little bit as we go. But this this bar indicates your progress through this cycle, and when you get to the end, you have to end this world map and start fresh with a wiped map back at the Smoldering City, aka the Citadel, aka the Ancient Citadel, I think, even in some references. But we're going to get into that actually now. So the Smoldering City is the Capitol building. It is the center of the map. The map is effectively circular or hexagonal, even though it goes on almost, well, I guess it ends, but it goes on for basically a long way. And here is kind of the capital city. This is where you embark from at the beginning of every cycle. And in the Smoldering City, which we can access by either clicking this button or by clicking on it itself, we can see a bit of a graphical representation of the city. Within this city are a few things, including an upgrades tree. The upgrades tree will guide you toward things that you can purchase as you play through the game to unlock more features, more buildings, more supplies, more all kinds of things. And so we're going to go into that now and purchase. No, we can't purchase. It doesn't let me purchase because I skipped the tutorials. I may change that and quote play through unquote the tutorials just so we get that first initial purchase ability now. Yes, so I will be back in just a moment. So I have skipped through both of the tutorial levels by opening them, using the escape menu, which I haven't actually even talked about yet, and using the skip tutorial option there, which is going to add a little bit to what we're going to see here in the game, but that's okay because it'll actually help explain a couple more things, and then we can move on into the actual gameplay. So here we have the upgrades button, and we now have 10 food stockpiles. These 3 here, which are also available on the world map screen, are your Citadel resources. You earn them by completing towns successfully, and by completing the tutorials, even though we didn't actually complete them, we earned 10 food stockpiles. And that allows me to purchase this first upgrade here, which is the Obsidian Archive level 1. Every upgrade in the upgrades tree will give you some kind of a base stat modifier. Some of them are negatives because they're reducing a negative effect, and some of them are positives because they're adding a positive effect. So kind of just read through them, and they will explain themselves, even if you don't know what this means yet, the Queen's Impatience means. But you gain a permanent -2% to the speed at which the Queen's Impatience grows. Impatience is a bad thing most of the time in the game, so you want it to slow down most of the time in the game. So reducing the speed is logical here. And then you also get some other kind of upgrade or ability or feature as part of each of these purchases. And this one just unlocks the Obsidian Archive itself, which is this tree, and also puts it on the map, which we'll see in a second, or the picture rather, the whatever you want to call the background there, is a place where records about great viceroys are kept. And it unlocks deeds, which is the other sort of most main feature of the screen here. So we unlock the Obsidian Archive that appears here on the map. It wasn't there before, and now we can open up the deeds menu, of which there are many. I'm not going to go through these, just to highlight that there are many of them. They serve as sort of mini achievements in the game, and most of them will give you experience points for completing them, coming in here and actually acknowledging them as completed, as well as obviously meeting their needs for it, their requirements. But also some of them will give you features, decorative buildings, and cornerstones, and some other aspects that you cannot get another way. So working on these is not a bad idea, and so keep that in mind if that's something that you like to do, but also keep it in mind because it's something you may want to do even if you don't particularly like to do achievement seeking. And many of them are tied out to achievements in your game launcher of choice. So if they have this green diamond, they tie out to an achievement in Steam, Epic, and GOG. And I know the game is also available on Game Pass. I don't know if there's an achievement system in Game Pass. I don't use Game Pass myself, but if there is, then they should be also tied out to that as well. Down here, of course, there's a highest reforged seal, which that has to do with the seals that we'll talk about later, and then some basic stats here, as well as some game history, including the 2 tutorials that I skipped. If we had come in here before I reset the save and did what I did, these wouldn't be here because we didn't even touch them. But since I touched them, they count in here as skipped towns, even though they don't count as losses in these overall stats. So let's step out of this screen and we can actually talk about oh, we got to go through the tutorial a bit still. Yep. So you'll be doing this yourself if you're playing the tutorial, so I'm not going to read through this tutorial step, but the Queen's Envoy here, who is kind of our guide through the tutorial, is telling us how the game works and how the Blightstorm resets the cycle. And so we can actually witness that here because the game is forcing us to reset the Blightstorm cycle. And so we're going to click this button to do so, because we've completed the tutorial map, even though we didn't play it. And we can now end the cycle. It gives us a little bit of a summary, including 2 failed towns, to end this tutorial cycle and start us back in the game where we were a few minutes ago. And a little bit more here telling us how things work, including that we need to reach out toward the seals, which are in different positions, and there's also different things available on the world map, and that's because different things. The world map is respawned every time you start the game, every time you do a reset of the Blightstorm. So the world map is dynamically generated for every new Blightstorm cycle, and so we have new things available to us, like a Royal Outpost world map modifier, which gives additional order choice, which we'll get into what orders are when we get into the game, or the Watchtower. The Royal Guard is watching, which means you can discover glaives without increasing hostility. I don't think I want to do that one for this first game because of the because talking about hostility in the game is actually a good idea as part of the sort of tutorial bit. So I think we're going to go next to this Royal Outpost, and we're going to pick a tile. And you can pick any tile you want. Each of the different colors represents a different biome. The green one is the one you played through in the tutorial. It's called the Royal Woodlands. The sort of grayish one here is called the Marshlands. It has a different theme to the biome, and different things are available in the biome. I have a whole tutorial about how the biomes work and what the differences are between them. So if you're interested in and don't want to try a town before you know what the biomes do, by all means go in and check out that tutorial. And then also there's a Scarlet Orchard over here, and it has a different theme as well to it that I go over in that same tutorial. And there are 3 additional biomes, none of which we can really see, although we can see one of them here at this point in the map. But they're not the ones you usually have in this very close initial range, because especially on this first cycle, because they are a little bit more difficult or involved at least. So let's go ahead and pick this Royal Woodlands tile right here, because I think Royal Woodlands is kind of the more generic level, or map rather, and I think it's worth it to have as an initial experience. Yes, thank you. Okay, you're going to make me do the whole tutorial now. I guess I should have not, but the convoluted thing will keep us in convolution. So let's go ahead and have the Queen's Envoy, skip through the Queen's Envoy portion here, and then we can do our own thing as part of this series, and we will do what we wanted to do, which is see the whole thing at the same time. So we're here in this tile. Well, let's start at the bottom. The bottom part of the screen is probably the one you want to start on. You need to know which difficulty you want to start on. There are 4 difficulties to start with, and then beyond the 4th difficulty, and once you complete that 4th difficulty, you'll unlock a prestige ladder, excuse me, a prestige ladder. The prestige ladder works like it does in many other roguelike games, or roguelite games as well, where you, by completing one level that has a specific challenge in it, you then get another level that adds on to that specific challenge with another challenge. and then the next level is another challenge, and so on. There are 20 prestige levels, each one adding an additional increasingly difficult challenge. And once you get to the top of that challenge, there is a new feature called the Queen's Hand Gambit, I believe. Don't quote me exactly on those words. That is like the final tier, the 21st tier, for example, that gives you the ultimate challenge in the game. I personally am on Prestige 3 or 4 at this point in through my Steam play. I probably could have gotten a little bit higher if I had invested more time in it, but I didn't. So we are, that is in climbing the ladder, so we are where we are. But suffice it to say, it is a challenge to step through those prestige levels. But if you like the challenge, then give it a try. So each difficulty level has an aspect down here that is changing each time. So at settler difficulty level, villagers eat less food, which is probably good if you don't know exactly what it is that you are supposed to do, so that you make sure that you have enough. So it's a little easier to have enough food for everyone throughout the entirety of the game. If you step up to Pioneer, you'll be required to provide more reputation to win the game. If you step up to Veteran, that's where Blight, Rot, and Corruption are introduced. And then if you step up to Viceroy, even though it doesn't change this year, which I kind of wish it would, there is some additional difficulty in terms of some of the random components that you're assigned. There are also pop-out detail screen here on each level. As I mentioned earlier, at least a couple of times probably, start at Settler if you've never played the game before. At least one map. If you win and you think it was easy, then maybe you could step up to Pioneer, but start at Settler. Don't jump ahead to Veteran. There's some numbers here that will matter somewhat, that do matter somewhat. Just suffice it to say that this is a very easy level to play on, relatively speaking. But it's hard when you compare it to a city builder, for example. And each time you step up here, these settings will change a little bit, and you'll get some additional negative effects every time you step up a difficulty level. For the purposes of this first game, I'm going to skip the Settler level because I've played a little bit. We're going to start at Pioneer. It's kind of a good balance between where a new player is going to start and where a veteran player may start a new save. I think I could probably handle starting at least Veteran on a brand new save personally, but to kind of reach the balance and also to not have the Blight, Rot, and Corruption just yet, we're going to start at Pioneer. And the reason I'm ignoring the Blight, Rot, and Corruption, or excluding the Blight, Rot, and Corruption here, isn't because I don't think I can handle it, but because it's an additional concept to the game that I don't know that new players are able will want to have confusing their comparison of their playthrough to mine. So Pioneer, I think, is a good balance. Over here on this panel, there is a summary that tells you about the biome you chose. Also tells you about the length of the game you chose, and that's where this more reputation required to win thing comes in, because Settler only requires 12 reputation points, whereas Pioneer requires 14. You'll also notice here that these numbers are changing when I change the difficulty level. As you step up in difficulty, you get more rewards. It's a little bit of a sliding scale, I think. So, but suffice it to say that you get more rewards the more difficult you play. And that kind of gives you that information. We also have conditions here. At Settler, which this does indicate, you have 2 positive effects and 1 negative effect. We'll talk about those in a minute. You also have additional effects brought to you either by the biome you chose and or any modifier tiles that you're adjacent to. I didn't mention this when I clicked here, but you can't actually click on these world map modifier tiles. You have to depart adjacent to them in order to claim them. That's this here, the Royal Outpost, which we've read before, so we can confirm that that is going to be included in our game. Also, on the screen, you have 2 panels that detail out what resources you'll be able to get from the game itself. What's available in the trees when you chop down trees, and what's available on the ground that you'll have to collect using different types of camps. But we'll get into that as well. When I step up to Pioneer, you'll see that this area up here changes. We had 2 greens and 1 red before. Now we have 2 greens and 3 reds. And if you step up to Veteran, you lose one of the greens to make it a red instead. And then Viceroy is also the same, although the reds are a little bit more intense. So back to Pioneer. Finally, on this panel, there's the Caravan Stab, which is the first one, because this is the one that most people will use. Most people don't come into these other 2 after they're familiar with the game. But as a first-time user, Summary is better to read first, and then Conditions, and then Caravans. But the Caravans allows you to choose between 2 to start the game with, and a 3rd once you unlock it in the upgrades tree in the Smoldering City. And you have 2 groups of people here that you can take with you, along with a bunch of supplies. This group has 6 humans, which you can read what their description is there. I'm not going to read all the descriptions of these. And 2 lizards, which have a different description. And by the way, this also tells you what they like in terms of their work environments and their food and services, which we'll get into what services are as we get to it. Down here we have a group of 7 beavers. They have different preferences and things that they enjoy doing. And we'll get into what those mean as we get into them as well. On each of these lines, there is a crate. The crate always contains the same goods for every party. So, to some extent, you can ignore those goods as being everybody has those. We're going to get those no matter what. But it's also good to know what's in there. So we have eggs, we have parts, we have wildfire essence, we have wood, and we have coal. You may not know what those mean yet, but that's what those are. And in addition here, we're going to get some jerky, some berries, and some vegetables, as well as 2 additional villagers. Down here, we're going to get some more eggs on top of the ones that are in the base goods, plus some pipes and some oil and some more, and the villagers as well. Now, for me, this decision is a little bit of a complicated one, and there's things that you can choose to do or not do, depending on a strategy, what strategy you like. There's an argument to be made that more people is better than less people, because the more people you have, the more stuff you can gather, the more stuff you can make, the more stuff you can do. And so having 8 people plus 2 versus 7 plus 2 means that I should pick this group. Another argument can be made that taking resources that have to be manufactured, like pipes and oil, is better than taking resources that are able to be gotten from the ground, like berries, vegetables, and eggs. Jerky is also a manufactured food item. I usually default to a person is better than not a person, and so in this case, I would probably choose this group. Also, this group offers me a little bit of variety out of the box by having humans and lizards, and a 3rd species that we don't know what it is, although we do know, because we only have 3 species unlocked right now. So this would be beavers anyway. Here, we're going to get 7 beavers to start with. Now, while beavers are good for some things, as you can see here in the tooltip, maybe I want also to be able to take advantage of the human abilities or preferences and the lizard abilities and preferences. In addition, right away, you don't know with these question marks whether you're going to get the additional species right away, or if you'll get them somewhere down the line through the gameplay of the town. So I think I'm going to pick this one for that reason as well. And so that kind of finishes up this panel, and then we go to the 3rd panel and final panel here, which is the embarkation bonuses. At the beginning stage of the game, you have 3 bonuses, 3 items you can bring with you, or stacks of items, and you have 3 points you can spend. As you progress through the game, unlocking things in the upgrades tree, you'll get more and more of these things, out to at least 3 of these 4 lines filled up with stuff. And you'll also be able to have more embarkation points, up to 10. So you'll have to make a few more decisions later in the game than you're making right now. Suffice it to say, for right now, picking all 3 to spend all 3 points is what you want to do. Ideally, you want to spend all of your points, always, because why wouldn't you want to spend all of these points? The points that are listed here are for something else, which we'll get into when we get into them in a later episode, but suffice it to say, for right now, or in the tutorial on embarkation, by the way, which I go into even a little more detail on this process, but this, you want to spend all of these points every time. It may even tell you not to embark until you spend them all. I can't remember. But we're going to embark, which means we're going to head out to a new town, or a site for a new town. Entering into the town for the first time gives you this screen, which presents you with the effects that you picked up that were shown on the left panel of the embarkation screen. We saw those there. We've read this one before, and this one just tells us about the Royal Woodlands itself. What the Royal Woodlands gives us. This is the biome effect, the gift of the woodlands, and in this effect, the trees will give more wood, and we'll get into that when we get into the actual gameplay here. The Forgiving Crown is our first forest mystery. These are those green and red effects that we were looking at based on the difficulty level we chose. The Forgiving Crown is a simple forest mystery, and by having this during the drizzle season, as you can see in the tooltip that pops out there, from Hostility 0 onwards, which we'll talk about what that means, gain 1 free cornerstone reroll for every reputation point gained during drizzle season. Now, cornerstones and rerolls and reputation points are things we haven't talked about yet. You may know what they are if you've been playing, but if you're new to the game, you don't know what those are. We'll talk about those in just a moment. Bleeding Trees, a red sticky substance is oozing out from beneath the tree bark. Gain 2 resin every time woodcutters cut down a tree. Now, this is also active in the drizzle season from Hostility 0, and this gives us some bonus materials by cutting down trees. Those are the beneficial forest mysteries, and those always take place in the drizzle season, which is the first of 3 seasons, and I have a whole tutorial, well, half a tutorial about seasons. Forest mysteries and seasons is one tutorial. So if you're interested in a little more detail on that, check out that tutorial as well. Looming Darkness is a forest mystery, and by the way, there's also a type here called Simple. There's also another type called... do I have any? Conditional. This simple forest mystery is available, is present on every map you will play. The rampaging storm stifles the spirit of all living creatures. An additional stack of this effect is added for each hostility level, and the effect is -4 to global resolve. And you can think of global resolve as satisfaction, kind of. It's a little more nuanced than that, but you can think of it as that. So during the storm, they will be under the effects of this. The storm is the 3rd season in the game. The 2nd season, by the way, has no forest mysteries. It's missing here. It never will. No matter what, the forest mysteries will always be positives in the drizzle, negatives in the storm. So, depending on your hostility level, which increases depending on decisions you make during your gameplay, you will have a stack of minus global resolve, and it's multiplied by the number there, and that number, I believe, is altered based on the difficulty level. Because we're at Pioneer, it's at 4. I think it's higher at higher difficulty levels, and lower at Settler. So that effect will be on us only during the storms, though. It goes away as soon as the storm ends. Creeping Shadows is our next forest mystery. It's also simple. Discovering a glade during the storm will decrease global resolve by -10 for 3 minutes. Discovering a glade is something we also haven't done yet, but suffice it to say, you do not want to do this. You do not want to discover any glades during the storm with this effect on, because it is effective from Hostility 1, which is almost impossible not to be in by the first storm. Maybe at Settler, it's possible. Maybe even near Pioneer. I haven't played Pioneer in a while. But Global Resolve -10 is not a good time. Forest Mystery of Rotting Wood is another simple one. The rain is causing the trees to rot and fall apart. Woodcutters fell trees 50% faster, but have a 100% chance of destroying their yield. This is active from Hostility 2. So what that means is they're faster chopping trees, but they're basically in a clearance mode. So that as you blow through the trees, you don't actually get any materials from them, any resources from them. You only get to remove the tree. And then finally, at Hostility 4, Nauseous Spores is conditional, and a sickening smell is in the air. Villagers need something to help them focus. This is active from Hostility 4 in the storm. And again, these are only active during the storm. They go away after the storm ends. This one has an effect called Stagnant. Time between breaks is reduced by 33% for villagers with this effect, which means that they take breaks more often. However, because it's a conditional, you can mitigate it, prevent it even. To prevent it, fulfill the following needs. Services ×1. That means that every villager in your town has to have services. And we'll get into what those mean when we get into services, in order to mitigate this effect for themselves. This is an individual effect, so if they have a service, then they will not have the shortened time between breaks. The more frequent breaks, the higher number of breaks, they will work as normal. So after we talked about this screen, we can clear it. It goes away, and we're into the actual game screen now. I didn't talk about the keyboard shortcuts in the settings menu, but you can get back there if you want to know what they are here in the in the escape menu, and those are in the options here, and you can take a look at what the key bindings and shortcut keys are all through here. I'm not gonna go over those in detail here though. One thing you should know about though is the encyclopedia. This has an in-game index about many things in the game, including lots of helps, lots of details on every building that's in the game that you've unlocked, and then as you unlock them, they're added in here. Lots of cornerstones of the ones you know, and then they are unlocked from there. The traders that you have and will unlock, which we'll get into trading in a little while, actually probably the next episode. And then all of the playable species here in the game, again, 2 of them being locked right now. So we started town with our people. We had 8 plus 2 that we knew about, so we're starting with 6 humans and 4 lizards. We did not get any of the 3rd species yet, but we will get that at some point in the future, probably. I don't think it's guaranteed. It might be, but we'll get the 3rd one at some point. We also have some alerts down here. Some of these are help-style alerts, like tips and tricks, telling you things you should do next as part of gameplay, and some of them are alerts based on the events that are happening in the game. So kind of most of them will be the latter, but here at the very beginning you will have some of those other tips as well. And then there's more tutorial type stuff here to read more, and that just takes you into that encyclopedia, by the way, and that specific help file here in the tutorial, or in the help. Many of those are things that I have covered tutorials on. They go a little bit more in depth than that little help blurb does. So we start out with 2 buildings in addition to our 8 or 10 people, 8 plus 2 people. We have the Ancient Hearth, which is the center of town. This serves as kind of like our capital building in a way, as in most games, most city builder games, but it also serves as a work point to some extent, a resting site for sure, and you also can do some upgrading and some managing of things here too. And we also have a main warehouse, which is our storage building. All collection of items, also all manufactured items, are delivered to the main warehouse or a small warehouse once we build one, whatever is nearest, for storage. All warehouses are linked together so that any item can be transferred immediately between them, or is available between them, regardless of where it was dropped off. It's available at any of them instantly. On the game map here, we're in a glade. That is any clearing, any opening that is not covered in trees. There are also many glades out here, which we can get into as we get into them, but they are all covered with fog of war. You have to cut down the trees to get into the glades to uncover the fog of war. And that's what this is about, the creeping shadows. By the way, all of these forced mysteries, all these effects are up here. The forest mysteries are up here. There are also effects down here in the bottom left, and these are the ones that you either started the map with, like the biome effect and the world map modifier, as well as other effects that are more temporary or permanent, specific to or as you earn in the game. So this one here, though, discovering a glade during the storm will decrease global resolve by -10 for 3 minutes. That's when you cut down the trees and open up a glade, which we're going to start cutting down trees in just a moment. But as you cut into a glade, that's what triggers this. And if this is active when you open up a glade, you will lose 10 global resolve for 3 minutes. So let's start kind of planning out our town. There are a few things that I like to do first, and that is to build some woodcutters camps. Our building is all done via these red maroon icons here, and then we also have the ability to manage our tree cutting here with the green icons, and a delete building here, just destroy building button here, which is red. So let's pick camps, which is where the woodcutters camp is, as well as all the other gathering camps, which we'll talk about each in turn. And let's put up a woodcutter camp, maybe right here temporarily. All camps are movable for free at any time, so putting your initial camp nearby your storage is more efficient for building that camp, and then you can move it to wherever you want to. So we're going to unpause so they can work on that camp, but I'd also like to plan out some roads for them, and I like to do a tic-tac-toe grid pattern of my roads, kind of centered around the ancient hearth, like this, but then I'll also often put a little bit back there too sometimes, or many times. So our villagers automatically, a couple of them, not all of them, went and worked on building this woodcutters camp, and then the rest of them, and then now all of them, have gone around building the roads. All of them except for one. One lizard is working already. They have a job. Their job is to keep the hearth burning. By working that job, they get one benefit, or they give a benefit to your whole town. I go into these in more specifics in one of the tutorials, but the lizard gives a gives a sacred pyre bonus to the whole town, where lizard firekeepers are very adept at ancient rites, +1 to global resolve. As I mentioned, we talked about resolve, and global resolve being resolve for everybody, being a positive effect, being satisfaction with your town, their environment they're living in, etc. So having an additional resolve for them is really useful, and +1 is very useful, which is why lizard is the default species to get put in the job of Hearthkeeper. Any species can do this job, any of the 5, once you have all 5 unlocked, but a lot of times lizard is the one that you will pick, or it's one that will be picked by default for you if you have them, if you embark with them, and you may stay with the lizard for the entirety of the town. It's a good choice. It may not be the best choice in every situation, but it's a good choice. They also have a personal bonus because they like 2 things. They like meat production and environments, and warm environments, because they are cold-blooded. Warm environments, or those icons, that meat and fire icon, as well as the humans here, leaf icon and Bierstein icon, are indicated on buildings in this location. So this building has a specialization bonus of warmth. So if you match this specialization bonus with the worker or workers assigned in this building, they will get a personal bonus as well from that matching. And in this case, they get the comfortable bonus, which gives this worker +5 to their resolve. Now, all bonuses are either comfortable. One bonus for each species. Each species is comfortable to give resolve, and the other bonus is productive. I forget what the other one's called, which gives additional productivity chance where you're producing goods. Actually, I think we can see it here. Proficiency, not productivity. Proficiency. And so putting a lizard in here also gives that lizard an additional bonus as well. Here we can choose the fuels we want to burn. In the settings, I've chosen to start my games with everything disabled but wood. You can choose whatever combination you want, but since wood is so abundant in basically every map, but especially in this biome, I like to have wood be my exclusive fuel source for the hearth to start every game. I may add or change these throughout the course of a town, but I start with wood. I always start with wood. And the fuel is used to keep the hearth burning. If the hearth goes out, your people will lose hope, as it says here and also on the mouse over tooltip, and the resolve will start dropping. And the result, by the way, is here, this green bar on each of the character panels, which we can talk about in a little bit as well. The character panel has a lot of features to it, so we're going to kind of spread those out a little bit. But the resolve is the green bar, or the bar the green bar is in, and it goes all the way up to there. You can also sacrifice, which we'll get into when we need it, which may be not even this town, but sacrificing can give you bonuses. You can mouse over these to see what those bonuses are by burning extra fuel. And then finally, this hearth level, which we will get into later as well, as we kind of get into that part of the game. So I started out by building a woodcutter's camp, but I need to staff it. And we know the specialization bonus here is wood. And if you noticed earlier, this beavers have the wood specialization, but we don't have any beavers yet, so we just need to stick some people in here. If you click the button, you get this radio of the available species and how many you have available to choose as possible workers. You can assign a person like that, or if you hold down shift when you assign, actually let's clear that one. If you hold down shift when you click to assign, it will fill all empty spaces with that particular species, assuming you have that many available. If I cleared this one and I picked the lizards, it would not replace the human. It would only fill in the empty spaces with lizards. There are also options here on how you want to handle tree cutting. This is a strong point of contention, especially here in my channel, on my community, but I like the only marked trees option, which I can talk about as I get into it. You'll also have an effects panel here. Sometimes it's a separate tab on some buildings, and this tells you if there are any of these effects down here, which we do know that we have bleeding trees and forgiving crown right now, as these are the temporary effects issued by these forest mysteries only during the drizzle. This bleeding trees is affecting this building's work in a positive way because it's got a green box around it, but it's affecting this. What's the green box? No, sorry, the green boxes here have to do with rarity, not challenge. Excuse that. But the green box here tells you that this is a uncommon effect, but this tells you that this effect affects this building, so we can kind of see that here. And so this will let the humans do some wood cutting, but we need to allow them to cut the trees because I have this option selected. And by the way, you can choose whichever option you want, and you can set the default that you prefer in the gameplay settings as well. So we're going to want to cut down trees for wood, for fuel and building. We're also going to want to cut down trees to open up some space for building, and we're going to want to cut down trees to get into glades to discover those glades. So I think what I want to do is a couple of things. First off, I want to add at least one more woodcutter's camp, and I'm going to put it up here. And then I want to let them build that. And I want to move this one just right like this. The arrow is important as that is the front of the building. That is the point at which people will come in and out of the building when they need to deliver resources or carry resources from the building to the storage or elsewhere. So I want to point it at the place where they're cutting because that's where they're making most of the trips, and then they're making a longer trip every so often with a handful of stuff to take it back to the storage. And I want to use these tree cutting tools, which do have Alt, Shift, and Control modifiers, which you can read what those are there and use what they are there, to mark a few trees here to tell them, I want you to cut these trees first. So I'm just going to mark a few trees to say, hey, cut those. Or at all, if I had chosen this or this, then it would be, if I had chosen any of the other options, it would be mark or cut these trees first. In this case, it's cut these trees because I don't allow you to cut anything else. And then over there, I'm going to cut into that glade at some point fairly soon. Let's go ahead and unpause again. We'll let them build that. But I'm also going to increase the priority here. This is the construction priority so that workers will come and build this building first. before they work on roads, even though they're kind of still working on roads, because it's a numbers thing. I'd also like to build possibly a couple other buildings, and I can get into why, but suffice it to say, because, and that is the crude workstation and the rain collector. And we'll get those kind of prepped and ready, although we can't actually build that one yet. It's just going to be there to mark. Now we just got a chime, and I actually forgot one other thing to show you before we kind of unpaused and got rolling, although it's kind of good that I did. We got a chime up here, and a new icon has appeared up here, in addition to the ones that were already here, a couple of which are grayed out. This is the cornerstone. The cornerstone is an effect that you will be offered every year at the beginning of the drizzle, or in the case of this first year, about halfway through the drizzle, or a quarter of the way, wherever we're at, a quarter of the way through the drizzle. And this gives you an effect that you can take to benefit your town. Most of them, at least, are beneficial. They're all beneficial. Cornerstones are always beneficial to some extent. But they sometimes will have some drawbacks to them, but they will definitely have at least one positive. And you can see that color box here is purple. That means that these are rare effects, which I think cornerstones are always rare. Sorry, purple is epic. They're always at least rare, if not epic or legendary. Blue being epic, blue being rare, purple being epic, and orange being legendary. So we have a choice of spices, which is herbs and roots production is increased by +1 for every 75 biscuits produced. Or generous gifts. Wealthy settlements attract wealthy settlers. Newcomers bring 40% more goods with them for every hearth level gained. Now this one may seem tempting, but I don't know what kind of herbs and roots we're going to get in this town. We can mouse over this icon to tell us what we can get off the ground if you forgot what it was from the embarkation screen. But you can see roots on the list there. Second row under the natural resources. So we're going to find roots on the ground. But how many? I don't know. And there's no herbs. The only way to get herbs and roots otherwise is via a farm, which hopefully we will take at some point as well. We also have the generous gifts, which I think, even though the expected gain right now is 0%, we can actually do some stuff to get to that point. So I'm going to take the generous gifts to get more stuff coming in. I think I'm going to take the generous gifts to get more stuff coming in with newcomer groups. But I want to make a couple other decisions first. One of those decisions is to look at this glowing icon down here, which is the reputation bonus button. Every time at the start of the game, you'll have 3 of these, and then every time you pass one of these blue dots, you'll gain another one. And this will offer you a choice of 3 or later 4 with an upgrade in the smoldering city, choices of different buildings that you can select and use to make or collect different or grow different types of resources in your town. So the provisioner can make these 3 items. Now, if you're a new player, you don't know what these 3 items mean, and I'm going to kind of skip some of the discussion about what the items mean and what they do, but we'll cover it a little bit more spread out. At 2 stars, and I have a tutorial, by the way, on blueprints and building choices that I talk about a concept I call star economy. Basically, it's the number of stars total on a building is that building's, I use that to measure the building's star economy, base star economy anyway. And then I subtract recipes, or subtract stars, so recipes I already own. Right now I don't have any of these recipes on any of these buildings for the most part. So, and I say that a little bit. I guess I had this one here, but I kind of add up the number of stars, and then I subtract the stars for the buildings that I have, and that kind of tells me kind of what the value or recipes that I have. That tells me the value of the recipe to me. Now there are some things to consider here. A lot of things to consider here, including the current best section on the tooltip that pops out. That tells you if you already have the recipe or not. A plus sign indicates you do not. An arrow indicates that you do have, and it shows you the maximum star level of that recipe below the icon. And the green arrow means that you do have it, but it's at a lower level. And a red arrow would mean that you do have it already, and it's at a higher level than what this building is offering. Now, the packs of provisions are available via a building we haven't built yet, as are the bricks. but but they're at a empty star, which I call a 0-star level. So going up to 2 stars is really good. Over here at the kiln, going up to 1 star is really good. It's okay over the 0-star bricks, but then we also get the other things here. There's a couple of things to consider when choosing a building. The first one is, what do I want at the beginning of the game? Well, or what can I use at the beginning of the game? At the beginning of a game, you can gather resources, and you can make some basic items. We can make coal, for example, by charcoal, by making it out of wood. We can make bricks by using stone or clay from the ground. We have clay available, the first item in the natural resources there, available on the ground in this map. And we also can make jerky from meat or insects. And if you aren't sure what each recipe can do, you can click on this magnifying glass, which takes you into the buildings tab of the encyclopedia. It focuses you on that building and shows you the recipes here, what the various options are for making that recipe, and what types of items are used in that recipe, including the quantities of those items. So you can kind of study the recipes here and figure out what you want to take with you. At this point in the game, being this is my first choice, I am mad. I would be mad because this isn't the choices that I would want to have as my first choice. But, as I mentioned at the very beginning of this video, this game is a roguelike, which means that you are given random choices, pseudo-random, because they're weighted a little bit, with some buildings having more weight at the beginning of a town and some having more weight at the end of a town, but you can technically get most, if not any, building at any time. So, for me, at this point, I would probably either choose the provisioner or the kiln, but I'm not going to choose building right now because I'm going to wait for a third thing to happen. And by the way, this is the first choice of 3. So there are going to be 2 more choices after we take this first building. I'm going to let the time go a little bit more while they kind of work on things and do things here. Let's also assign some people into this. Maybe I'll do that. That's fine. And I'm going to give them some places to mark over here. I'm going to use the control modifier, which limits me from marking trees that would open up a glade. And I'm going to let them kind of just do their thing here. R to rotate a building you have moused over, but not clicked on. You cannot have clicked on a building if you want to use the R key. A little bit longer, sorry. About a third of the way into the drizzle, you get another icon that pops up here called orders. Now, orders are an order from the Citadel, from the Queen herself, perhaps, but definitely one from the Citadel, the Smoldering City. And depending on the difficulty level you're playing at, you will have between 8 or 9 and 12 orders. Because we're playing at Pioneer, we have 11 that unlock throughout the course of the town, the settlement. We have 3 that open up here at the beginning, and then the rest of them unlock at certain time intervals throughout the gameplay. If we click on this pick button for one of the 3, that locks that one out as our first choice we have to pick from. You can pick from any of the 3, but once you click one, you're stuck with it. And this gives you an order that tells you the Queen would like you to send or do or something in your town. This first one is trading post. It wants me to build a trading post and have 5 amber that I'm willing to deliver to the Citadel. And for doing so, we can get 20 biscuits, which are a cooked food item, 5 parts, and 6 tools. Or we can choose booming economy, which means we need to sell goods worth at least 10 amber to a trader or trade route. We'll talk about those later, what those mean. That'll give me 10 amber, 20 oil, and 2 random villagers immediately upon completing this order. And then the camps. If we build a harvester's camp and a stonecutter's camp, we will get the rewards of clay, reeds, and parts. Now, if you're a new player, you don't know what a lot of these items mean. But some orders are a little bit easier to complete than others. And some orders are easier to complete based on the choices or the strategies you're trying to conduct. I'm not going to pick one of these just yet. We're going to save this for the next episode, as well as much more in this town. But suffice it to say that you'll want to pick one that you think you can accomplish through playing through this town, based on the strategies or plans you're making. And if you're a new player, you'll probably just pick one of them at random. I would recommend this one as probably the easiest one to accomplish, because you literally just have to build 2 of these camps that you'll probably end up wanting to build at some point along the way anyway. And then these 2 kind of vary a little bit depending on situations, but I would probably go with this one because I don't have to give away any money. I just have to trade or sell goods, and then I get some more amber, which is money, and oil, and some extra people. Because remember, one strategy says a person is better than no person. But then again, these rewards are also good, so there's a little bit of variance. But I think as an initial player, this camps option would be a better choice given these 3 things. But we will save that for the next episode. I know this episode moved a little slow for those of you who are perhaps more experienced players, or at least viewers of the game. But this town will go faster than the first town in the Steam series. So as I mentioned at the beginning, if you are a new player, check out that first town or 2, the first 6 to 8 or 9 episodes in the Steam series, so that you can experience a little bit more detail than what I'm covering here. And then we're going to kind of accelerate this a little bit to kind of get into more of the gameplay and a little less of the discussion and explanation, and save some of that discussion and explanation for either that other series or for those tutorial series that I mentioned also. So if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions on some of the choices that I have been given, by all means, take a look at those, and or send me those in the comment section. Let me know in the chat section of this premiere, or come to my Discord server. You can find the link to that in the description below, and let me know your thoughts about it there. We will end this episode here, and in the next episode, we will actually make some of these decisions and get moving on the gameplay, and kind of work toward accelerating the gameplay so that I don't explain every particular detail of the entire game in this Let's Play series, and instead save a lot of that detail for the tutorials. So thank you all for joining me, and I will see you next time. Bye for now.